Hello, and welcome to November's reading recap. So November was quite the reading slump for me. I don't know what happens in the end of the year. I just can't read anymore. I don't know why. It happened last year. I spent all of December trying to finish one book, and it happened again this year. So I didn't actually start reading a book until late November, which is nuts for me because I usually go through like 5 or 6 books a month. And that did not happen this month. So the first book I read this month was the anthology from the Author Conservatory. So since I only read 2 books this month, I thought it'd be fun to go through the anthology and just share my thoughts on all of the short stories inside of it. There are 9 different authors that were highlighted, and I just wanted to share a little bit about each story. Since each story is so different, they're not all the same genre. There's a whole bunch of different genres and different emotions crammed into one book. So let's get started. So the first story in this anthology is a book dragon story. So this story is about a dragon who's an apprentice at a library and who wants to become one of the authors, but she can't control her flame. Livy really paints a beautiful picture with all of her descriptions, and I just love how it starts. I really felt like that it was kind of like a fairy tale. With the style, I could really visualize it. I felt like it was kind of that fairy tale sort of vibe. And it was also from the perspective of a dragon, with a different take on dragons than are usually found in fairy tales. So I thought it was a really fun and creative story. The next story in the anthology is People of the Rain. So this had a really neat concept, and she did a great job executing it. I just felt like the magic system itself and the characters were a little bit too complex for a short story, because these stories themselves are not very long. Next, I read Shadowed Echoes from Hope, and oh my goodness, this drew me in right from the bat. I could totally envision it right from the start, and I was just sucked into this story. It's such a neat concept. So it's just set up super well right from the beginning. I could really feel all of those emotions with the unknown and wanting to wait just a little longer. Basically, his father is trapped inside of a portal, and he's just been leaving it open, trying to wait for him to come back, and he doesn't want to let go. But his grandmother is pressuring him to close the portal because there's danger, there's lots of stakes. So it was just such a neat story, and it really drew me in. The suspense is super high, as are the stakes, and nothing in the story felt slow. I will also say I could really see the concept of the short story flushing out into a full novel, and that would be super cool because it's so intense and really high stakes. Another random fact is the whole time I was reading this, I had the Ender's Game soundtrack playing through my mind. So that gives you an idea of the feel of this book. It was pretty intense, high stakes, and it was awesome. After that, I had The Little Tie Shop by Abby Lynn Voss, and she is who I got my pre-order goodies from. So I got a little bookmark, that's really cute, and then a cookie recipe with a sweet note. So this story drew me in right from the beginning. It was so sweet. I loved all of the little details, like the embroidery on her overalls was just such a sweet touch, and it showed her personality and also the emotions that she was dealing with. There was also a really sweet brother-sister relationship in it, which I really enjoyed. The story itself, with the magic and the little tire shop, it reminded me a lot of Encanto, with the door not opening. And I felt like it was just such an emotional ride for the character, and I just really enjoyed it. I wanted to read one of my favorite lines from the story because I feel like it sums it up so well. So it's coming from Quinn, who is the main character, and it says, "Is the shop's magic broken, or is it just me, the broken gear in my family?" And that basically sums up the whole story. But it is such a sweet story, and I really enjoyed it. After that, we had The Penny Dragon. So this was a really interesting take on a story. So it's about a grandmother who has dementia. So I felt like it was really sweet and peaceful with a very sad undercurrent. I will say I felt like I was a little bit confused at the genre in the beginning because there is a bit of magic in it, but it's also in the mind of a woman with dementia. So you don't always know what's real or what's not real, if she's seeing things or if she's remembering things correctly. But it was such a unique perspective on the story. And I had the Interstellar soundtrack playing through my head during this one. So just like sad, a little bit melancholy, but also very unique. I really enjoyed this one. Then we had Fairies in the Garden by Rachel Elizabeth. So this story is about an old man who's trying to catch a fairy to get his daughter back, and a very feisty fairy who is a twist later on. So I felt like it was just a sweet fairy tale about family. It has a little bit of a slower start, but overall it's really sweet and it really draws you in, and she does have quite a few sweet twists involved. After that, we had Obsidian Wings. I really enjoyed the descriptions coming into this one from the perspective of Core with the she-human and he-humans and her view looking onto the human life. I felt like it was really unique and really interesting, and I really felt like she dove into this POV and it really immersed you. It was such a beautiful story of subverting expectations and stereotypes of what you were told versus what really is. The next story in the anthology is Symbiosis. So I was a little bit confused at the beginning about what was going on, but I think that was because I was at a restaurant reading, and it's not really the most greatest place to be reading a book, especially when it's at a family reunion at a restaurant and there are lots of kids that are my siblings that are trying to play a game over the table by me, and it wasn't really a great start. So afterwards I didn't get very far into it, and then I started over because I couldn't focus and I had no idea what was going on. But once I was able to focus, it really pulled me in. It's in an apocalyptic dystopian world with really strong emotions and family ties. Lastly, we have Colors of Grief. I was not ready for the story, I will say. Oh my goodness, she paints such beautiful pictures right from the beginning. It's so vivid. I just couldn't stop reading. And oh my goodness, it just drew me in. Every scene, every description, it all hurt. I was seriously tearing up by the end. And I was not ready to end the anthology crying. Like, that's not how you should end an anthology, but I was tearing up by the end of this story. It was just so moving and heart-wrenching, and she did a phenomenal job portraying the grief. And so that was the first anthology by the Author Conservatory. Let me just say, it's really cool to see this as a real book, because I read it as an ER, and I don't like reading things on devices, and I am doing that a lot lately nowadays, unfortunately. But I got this in the mail yesterday, and I am just so thrilled to actually be holding it, and it feels like such a real book, which is such a weird thing to say because it is a book, but it feels like a real book. And I love this cover. It is just so gorgeous and so beautiful, and I'm really excited for when I get to be in an anthology some point eventually in the future, because we don't know when that's happening yet. And then next, because this is not a video about the anthology, and I did read one more book, just one more book this month. This is Capturing Hope. So this is the other book that I read this month. So it's from that series that I keep reading. It's the Heroines of World War II, published by Barber. And I've read, I don't know, like a handful of other ones published in this series. They're not all by the same author, so it's different takes on World War II and heroines of World War II from different sides of the war, from different nationalities, from different perspectives. It's a really unique and interesting series, and I've really enjoyed it so far. And so this is another one from that series. And so it's about a woman who is one step ahead of the Nazis. So in it, some of the tropes that I have enjoyed so far were forced proximity. So there is a guy character who is trying to save her, and that's always fun, I mean. And then there's also enemies to lovers as well, which is always fun, especially since he was tasked by her father, who ended up dying before he could communicate to her that this guy had to get her out of Poland before the Nazis invade. And so there's this whole storyline of her following him around but not really wanting to, and then getting stuck in Poland and all of that. Another really funny thing that I just had to mention because it amused me was, I mean, they're not really getting along, the guy and the girl, main characters, don't really get along very well. And it just made me crack up so much because he was calling her Your Highness, and she hated it. And it just made me laugh because those are just always funny moments. And so that was Capturing Hope. And so these were the two books that I read this month. So it was a reading slump for sure. I mean, December's not looking much better either. I just haven't been very motivated to read lately, but hopefully that will change, and hopefully I'll be able to get through some of these arcs that I'm really supposed to be reading, because there are a couple of them, and I just don't like reading on devices. I don't know, it's probably because I work on a computer, and I just feel like when I'm done working, I really just want to sit down with an actual book and read it. And I don't really like being on devices any more than that. But that seems to be my lot in life. So Overall, I really enjoyed the 2 books that I read this month, and if you read any books this month, I would love to chat about them. So drop them in the comments below, and I'd love to chat more about what you read this month. If you have any book suggestions that you think would get me out of my reading slump, I would love them. So drop them in the comments below, and I'd love to chat with you more there. So without further ado, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next week.